On January 4, 1884, a handful of well-dressed London intellectuals met in a drawing room and founded an organization that would eventually outlive every empire of its era. They chose a name that sounded harmless, the Fabian Society, and a motto that sounded patient. For the right moment you must wait, but when the time comes, you must strike hard. They also chose an emblem, a wolf in sheep's clothing. They were not joking. Welcome to the stateless standard. In the next 11 minutes, we will trace how a tiny parlor club of utopian socialists quietly captured the commanding heights of British culture, law, and finance, then exported the same slow-motion revolution to the entire Anglosphere and beyond. The Fabians never seized power with rifles. They infiltrated it with essays, lectures, dinner parties, and an almost erotic devotion to bureaucracy. The result is the modern administrative state you currently live under. You were never asked to vote for it. The founding circle reads like a who's who of genteel radicalism. Sidney and Beatrice Webb, technocratic obsessives who believed society should be run like a giant, perfectly rational post office. George Bernard Shaw, playwright, eugenicist, and admirer of both Stalin and Mussolini, depending on the day. Graham Wallas, political psychologist who helped invent the modern focus group state, and dozens more. Virginia Woolf's cousins, Annie Besant the Theosophist, even a young Ramsay MacDonald. Their method was explicit. Reject violent revolution, too vulgar, too Russian, and instead pursue permeation, infiltrate existing institutions, bore from within, and wait for the old order to collapse into their patiently waiting arms. Their coat of arms could have been a termite. Visual, timeline animation. 1884-1900 London School of Economics founded with Fabian money. 1918 Labour Party adopts Clause of 4 written by Sidney Webb. 1945-51 Attlee government implements the Webb blueprint. NHS, nationalizations, cradle-to-grave welfare state. The beauty of the Fabian strategy is that it is almost impossible to oppose without sounding like you hate education, healthcare, or the poor. By 1900, they had seeded the LSE with their disciples. By 1920, they had rewritten the Labour Party's constitution. By 1945, Clement Attlee, himself a former Fabian lecturer, simply enacted the 1937 Fabian policy document, almost page for page. National Health Service? Fabian. Comprehensive schooling? Fabian. Council housing empires? Fabian. The modern British state is not a compromise between left and right. It is the Fabian Society finally arriving at the station after a 70-year journey. And they never stopped at Britain's shores. The Fabians franchised. Australia's Labour Party, New Zealand's welfare state, Canada's NDP, India's Planning Commission under Nehru, all proudly acknowledge Fabian DNA. In the United States, they worked through the New Republic crowd, the progressive-era technocrats, and later the architects of the New Deal. When Hillary Clinton was asked which politician she most admired, she did not hesitate: Sidney Webb. When Tony Blair wanted to rebrand Labour, he called it New Labour, but the fine print was pure old Fabian. And then there is the ghost at the Fabian feast who was never formally a member, yet whose money and vision lubricated the entire project: Cecil John Rhodes. Rhodes was not a drawing-room socialist. He was an imperial colossus who by age 30 had monopolized South African diamonds, cornered global gold production, and carved out a private country the size of Western Europe that still bears his name: Rhodesia. When he died in 1902 at 48, he left the bulk of his fortune to a single purpose: the creation of a secret society whose explicit goal was to recover the United States for the British Empire and eventually to federate the entire English-speaking world under one benevolent Anglo-Saxon superstate. His last will and testament reads like a Fabian wet dream written by a Bond villain. He funded the Rhodes Scholarships, still advertised as generous academic awards, yet originally designed to recruit the brightest young Americans and colonials and immerse them in Oxford's imperial ideology for 2 years, so they would return home as unconscious agents of Anglo unity. He instructed his executors to establish a clandestine society, with its headquarters in England, extending its branches across the world, modeled on the Jesuits in structure and the Mafia in loyalty. The first circle of 7, led by Lord Milner and including Fabian luminaries like Lord Rosebery and the Webb's close friend Arthur Balfour, quietly began work within months of Rhodes's death. The Milner Group, later called the Round Table, became the transmission belt between Rhodes's imperial millions and Fabian gradualism. They founded the Royal Institute of International Affairs, Chatham House in London, and its American offspring, the Council on Foreign Relations in New York, both staffed, bankrolled, and ideologically aligned with the Fabian project of elite management. When the LSE needed a permanent home, it was Rhodes' money, laundered through the British Treasury, that purchased the building. When the Labour Party needed research and policy blueprints, it was Round Table journals and Rhodes Trust networks that supplied them. The wolf and the lion discovered they hunted the same prey. They simply preferred different table manners. Rhodes's will even contained a clause authorizing his trustees to quietly alter any part of the document to suit changing circumstances, so long as the core mission of Anglo-World Federation remained intact. Over the decades, they have done exactly that. The overt imperialism was retired after 1945, but the scholarships, the trusts, the quiet endowments, and the revolving door between Oxford Common Rooms and the upper civil service continue exactly as intended. Today, the Rhodes Trust is chaired by people who speak fluent ESG and stakeholder capitalism, yet the money still comes from the same apartheid-era diamond mines, and the mission, softened, rebranded, but unbroken, still funds the education of tomorrow's technocratic class. The Fabians provided the socialist rhetoric, Rhodes provided the capitalist cash and the imperial infrastructure. Between them, they built the twin pillars of the modern managerial state, the moral certainty that ordinary people require guardianship, and the financial means to make that guardianship permanent. And the modern Fabian Society still meets in Westminster, still publishes polished pamphlets, still quietly places its members on government commissions, regulatory bodies, and the boards of NGOs that write the policies governments later discover. Membership is no longer limited to champagne socialists. It now includes serving cabinet ministers, Bank of England deputies, and the heads of Britain's largest charities. They do not need to hide. The revolution was completed generations ago. The deepest cynicism of the Fabians is not their wolf emblem. It is their certainty that the average citizen is too childlike to be trusted with freedom. Beatrice Webb wrote in her diary that democracy was merely a transitional stage before rule by a natural aristocracy of talent, meaning, of course, people exactly like Beatrice Webb. Shaw openly advocated killing those who could not justify their existence to a state panel. Wells dreamed of a world brain, administered by an enlightened elite. They differed only on the body count required to reach utopia. They never differed on who should be in charge. So the next time a politician promises to modernize your healthcare, reform your schools, or regulate your speech for the common good, remember where the script was first written. It was not written in anger. It was written in drawing rooms over sherry by men and women who genuinely believed they were your moral and intellectual superiors, and who built the machinery to make sure you never got the chance to prove them wrong. If this quiet history of the longest coup in democratic history has been useful, like and subscribe to the Stateless Standard. Share the video before the algorithm decides gradualism is sensitive, and tell us in the comments, wolf, sheep, or shepherd, which one are you? Until next time, stay awake, stay sovereign, and never trust anyone who needs a century to implement their urgent reforms.